tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. The other day I was invited to one of our local hospitals to visit a man who had had a stroke. He was a barber by profession in a suburb of Melbourne, and one day he was at work, and then he and working normally, and his life was going normally, and then he had a stroke, so he was taken to hospital and almost died. But luckily the doctors were able to look after him and care for him. So at first he couldn't speak, and he was almost paralyzed for a while, but after a few weeks he gradually recovered to the point where he could talk normally and move his arms even though he couldn't move his legs. And we were invited to go and bless him and give him some encouragement because he could speak, but suddenly his life had changed dramatically. All his relatives were in Thailand. He was a Thai gentleman who lived in Melbourne for many years. So he was arranging to get rid of his house, sell his car, and he had the thought to return to Thailand maybe to spend the last part of his life close to his living relatives because he had so few in Melbourne. But it made me think about the uncertainty of life, how in one moment you're working normally, going about your business, the next moment you're in hospital close to death, maybe paralyzed by a stroke or whatever. It can happen so quick, this change. Obviously for many people it's not so quick, so dramatic, but in this case it was. So when you have a close brush with death or some kind of serious illness, accident, some kind of crisis like that, most people find it's a real wake-up call, isn't it? Wakes you up to certain truths that often you forget or go to the back of your mind when things are going, as we say, normally. So if you have an accident or a stroke or something, it can really change your life very dramatically. So for many people it leads them to think about things, contemplate, ask questions, think more deeply about one thing, more deeply about life, because when you come to face death, often it makes you understand life a bit better. So one thing, if you come close to death, but you haven't died, you start to value the life that you still have, the time that you still have, because you realize how precious it is when you're in a situation that you're close to death, very near to death. We say every minute, every hour, every day counts if you think you may not have much longer to live. The Buddha himself encouraged his students to reflect on the impermanence of life, how things can change very quickly, because it helps to give us right perspective, right view on things, to see the impermanent nature of both our physical body, but also the world around us, and just the nature of things is everything is subject to change. And there's that famous incident where the Buddha asked his assistant, Venerable Ananda, and said, "Oh, Ananda, how often do you think about death? How often do you contemplate death? You become mindful of death?" And Ananda said, "Oh, 7 times a day," which is quite a lot to consciously, mindfully recollect death. 7 times a day is already a lot, but the Buddha said, "Oh, too little." And he said the Buddha himself recollects death with each in-breath, each out-breath. So constantly setting the standard for that. So it really is integral to understanding life, is to know that death can come at any moment and change everything. It also brings up all these questions that, as monks here and all around the world, I would imagine they get asked every day. When you die, where do you go? What happens? Who dies? Is there such a thing as rebirth, reincarnation? If there is, what determines where you're reborn? Where do you go? What happens? Or maybe some people believe there's nothing. When you die, nothing happens. The end of everything. And so on. All these questions are stimulated when you recollect death. Perhaps that's why the Buddha encouraged us to do it. It's because it does lead to questions and you may not be able to immediately answer them, which is not surprising. Who would know the answer to all these questions straight away? If we're brought up in the world, there'll be many things we haven't learned or encountered yet. So sometimes we go to the word of the Buddha to help. So the Buddha would talk about the different planes of existence, which indicates that, it's not just what you can see with your eyes in terms of the human plane, the human realm, or the animal realm, which is what we encounter every day. We see them in the world, other human beings, other animals. There's also these invisible planes which normally you don't see, say like heaven realms or hell realms, ghost realms. But the Buddha did mention these. And if you have great confidence in the wisdom, the clarity, the teachings, the purity of the Buddha and his insights, then that is already helps to start answer some of these questions. Maybe when you die, you'll come back as a human. Maybe you go to another realm. What will determine that? So that brings up the question about karma and rebirth, and so on. But it stems from recollecting death, doesn't it? Once you're thinking about death, then you think about. Another one is the last moment of your life, because people are always saying, well, the last thought will determine where you're reborn or what plane of existence you go to after you die. So it's important to be able to be mindful at the very end of your life, to know the last breath, as it were. So it's another question that's brought up by contemplating death. It also brings up thoughts about life, doesn't it? Once you're thinking about the fact that you may die at any moment, any time, and you may also go on to think about where you may aspire to be reborn if you haven't reached Nibbana yet, then it leads to this question, well, how do you want to live this life to be happy, and then if there is such a thing as rebirth, where will you be reborn? These are questions you may not be able to answer, but at least they'll come up. And generally, recollecting death does that. In Buddhism, we call it marananusati, the recollection of death. So it's one of these essential or core meditation objects that we develop, and not to make us depressed and unhappy, although it may bring up that reaction. It's more to help sober the mind, stop it getting so intoxicated with the world and what the world has on offer, because that's a huge problem that stimulates mental defilements, doesn't it? We get intoxicated with the things we like of this world, so we're endlessly thinking and pursuing all kinds of happiness and pleasant experiences, and then we're endlessly running away or trying to get away from what we don't like, what we don't want. That's what we mean by intoxication with the world. So even the idea of death is something most people don't want to face, of course. We all want to live a long life. Some people even want to live forever. But death is one of those things we don't really want to face. But then there's all these other things we do want to face, meaning there are all the things that we desire and pleasure, and the pleasures and the happinesses and the material things that we associate with pleasure. So most people associate happiness and pleasure with having wealth, because with wealth you get freedom to go places, buy things, do what you want more, less bound by the need just to make ends meet, earn a living. So most people in the world are pursuing wealth and happiness through wealth. Most people want more money, to put it bluntly. We all recognize the advantages of money. So most people want money, and you could even say it's the most universal religion of the world, the belief in money, because money in itself is often not worth that much. It may just be figures on a piece of paper or on a computer, or even a dollar bill is still just a piece of paper. The important thing is people give value to it, and everyone gives value to it. Whatever your background, your culture, your language, everyone recognizes money as a useful thing. So that brings up a lot of desire. In terms of death, well, it's a good reflection sometimes to think, well, when I die, I won't be able to take money with me. They do love to, in some cultures, put money in the coffin so that you have a bit next life. Obviously that's based on the belief that there is the next life, the afterlife. So I've been to a few funerals where sometimes real money is put into the coffin and then burnt, or sometimes it's fake money. Perhaps people are happier burning fake money, but they put it in with the coffin. Sometimes they're putting in jewelry, gold, silver, gems and rubies and diamonds, all with the belief that this can go with the person to the next life, so they have a bit to start with. If you got nothing, that might sound quite good, or at least next life I got something to start with. But of course none of it can go with you, can it? Because when you cremate a coffin, everything gets burned, or when you bury someone, everything is just buried. You don't take anything with you to the next life. So that gives you a very good perspective, doesn't it? When you think about death, it gives you perspective on life and how meaningful or valuable things are, particularly material wealth, money, material wealth, property, possessions. It doesn't take much contemplation to realize, these won't go with you. You have to leave them behind. Therefore, they're not the most important things, because you have to leave them behind. And you should get used to that. You get on a plane, they always tell you, well, if there's an emergency and you have to leave the plane in a hurry, don't take your belongings with you, because they weigh you down and they get in the way when you're trying to exit the plane in an emergency. Well, death is a bit like that, isn't it? If you're in your mind, you're attached to all this material wealth that you've got and developed through your life. It's going to weigh your mind down, because you keep thinking about it, keep worrying about it. even though you can't actually take it with you. Perhaps this is why the Buddha encouraged us to start practicing generosity and dana through our life, because you're learning to give away. You're learning to let go, learning not to try and carry everything along with you, because ultimately you can't do that. You have to let go of everything when you die. Someone was asking this about this phrase Ajahn Chah talks about, dying before you die, the other day. Well, when you practice dana of any form, generosity, charity, helping others, is a form of dying before you die, because you're letting go, aren't you? You're letting go of something that was, at least nominally, conventionally, under your ownership, under your possession. Your money or food or some other thing, or it could just be something like knowledge, your information that you know. You're letting it go, you're giving it away, you're sharing it with others. So it's practicing as if you're dying, isn't it? You die from that little bit of dana that you give away. It's no longer yours, so you've died from it. So we can say dying before you die. You're seeing the impermanence of that food. So you cook a meal, and you might cook it with a lot of love and attention, try and do the best meal you can, but then you share it with your friends, or you offer it to monks, or you take it to homeless people. There's many ways we might share food. We give it to some animals. You're giving it away. It's gone from you. It's left your ownership. So it's like a little moment of death. So they say people who do a lot of dana, practice a lot of generosity through their life, often are not that afraid of death, because they already know how to give away, how to give things and share things. Some people who practice vipassana meditation look on people who do a lot of generosity as maybe people who can't meditate. They say, they don't know how to practice vipassana and see the impermanent nature of things. But maybe they're already doing it as they practice that generosity. Because you're giving up some ownership. When you give something material away, you give up ownership, don't you? And you see that sometimes there's a doubt in the mind. Do I really want to give this away? A little bit of a pull, an attachment. So Ajahn Chah was saying, just die in that moment, just let it die. Just die from that thing that you're attaching to. Give it away. And what happens? You feel liberated. You feel free, relieved, not to have to worry about it anymore. And maybe you've helped someone in that moment, so you've done something good as well. But you have to try it, don't you? You have to try it, taste the liberation of sharing or giving before you know what the Buddha or what Ajahn Chah or any other spiritual teacher is talking about. Until you've done it, you won't know. If you do it with mindfulness and some understanding, it can be an opportunity to really practice dying before you die. Seeing the impermanence of the world, because you can't take any of it with you anyway, so you might as well practice giving some away and helping the people and the world around you. So sometimes they say the best giving is when you don't really want to give, or you're clinging to something, you give it away. Something you'd rather keep for yourself, but you just say, no, I won't this time, I'll give it away. And a little bit of yourself, your attachment dies at that moment as you give it away. You may have to wrestle with your own attachment for a while before you can successfully give it away. Because of the possessiveness, the sense of ownership. Sometimes even it can be knowledge, your own, the things you know. Sometimes we're stingy with our knowledge. We don't want to share what we know. It's like our possession, even though it's just an idea or some bit of information. We don't want to give it away or share it. Sometimes it's our relationships. So the Buddha talks about one kind of stinginess of your family and friends, your circle, the circle of the people you know. You don't want to share them with anyone else. Some people get angry when you talk to their friends because it's their friends. They have this ownership. They have to learn to give away their friends, as it were, let go of them. So the practice of letting go through dana we do in many walks of life, many areas of life. It's not simply offering food to monks, although that is a very good way to practice dana. There's many ways we practice dana. Sometimes people don't want to let their friends know about who their teacher, spiritual teacher is, their dharma teacher, or some monk or some nun that they go to, and they don't want others to know because it's their teacher. They're worried somehow the value of that relationship with the teacher will be diminished by sharing it with others. It's the opposite, isn't it? Once you share, once you've done it, you've died from that little bit of attachment, then you gain something because you maybe introduce someone else to a teacher or to the Dharma. They'll benefit. The world improves a little bit. But at first there's a hesitation because of attachment, so you have to learn how to overcome that. So they say, when there's the hesitation and you're feeling kind of uncomfortable giving, maybe that's a sign that's really the right thing to give away. And once it's done, then you don't have to worry about it anymore, and you've done something good. I remember when Ajahn Chah passed away, I was staying at his monastery, and in his monastery all the monks live in kutis, little wooden huts in the jungle. Nothing very glamorous, just a little wooden hut, not very big, a few meters by a few meters. But still, it's your place in the jungle, in the forest, so you look after it and you value it because it's your refuge. It keeps you away from the ants and the mosquitoes and the snakes. Well, not always from the snakes, sometimes the snakes come into the kuti, but generally it keeps you away from wildlife and weather, obviously. So I was staying in the kuti, and as the news of Ajahn Chah's passing went around, more and more monks started to visit the monastery and stay there. So 2 senior monks I knew arrived, and they said, I'm looking for somewhere to stay in the monastery, and all the kutis, all these huts had become full because so many monks were visiting to pay respects to Ajahn Chah's body and to join in the ceremony, the funeral. So I said, I have a kuti, I have a place where I'm staying, you can come there. So there was 2 of them, so they moved into the room, because it was a very small room. So I moved on to the veranda of the kuti, which was at least something. I still had a place. So it was like giving up. It was like a form of dana, giving away accommodation. Then I met another monk who was senior to me, and I thought, maybe I should help him. And I was thinking, but I'm on the veranda, and the veranda was very small, and I was already getting walked over by these first 2 monks I'd put into the kuti. So I was thinking, how can I help this monk? I thought, there's the area underneath the hut, the kuti. Maybe I'll move there and he can take my place on the veranda. So I thought about it for a while because I realized it's going to make my life difficult, and I was working very hard with the funeral service and doing many things. So I thought, okay, I'll put this other monk on the veranda and then I'll go under the kuti, basically in the open, but just with a little bit of roof over me. So I went downstairs. Then another monk turned up with nowhere to stay. So that's it, I'm off. So I just said, you have my space, and I just took my little umbrella and I went out into the forest and I put my mat down on the floor of the forest and started camping in the forest. So I just abandoned the kuti to all these other monks. And so I guess you call that a good thing, but I was kind of a bit doubtful, was putting myself to a little bit of difficulty. So I went off into the forest. I thought, well, at least in the forest, nothing's going to happen. I'll be left alone. I can just have this space in the forest. But then the number of monks just kept increasing. And one monk came to where I was staying, and another monk. In the end, even my little bit of forest, I was completely surrounded by other monks. And I kind of just gave up and said, oh, well, I'll just stay here. This is all I've got. I couldn't even walk out from where I was sleeping without having to tread or go over another monk, because the forest became so full of monks. It got to the point where the chickens of the forest chickens couldn't go anywhere. They had to sit on top of the monks. So I thought, well, this is a good chance to let go. So sometimes letting go and dying to the situation is a bit like that. You first of all, you want to control your dana. You're giving, you're sharing. Then, after a while, maybe things just develop to the point where you have no control. You just have to give up and let go. As if you're dying, you're like, okay, I have nothing left. Everyone else can have it all. But it's quite liberating. Then you don't have to worry about anything, because you've given away all ownership or possessiveness. So practicing the Dhamma can be like that. You don't always have to literally give up ownership rights on everything, but mentally it's something you have to investigate, isn't it? Dying before you die. Because one day you will definitely have to give up ownership of everything when you die from this world. Your body, your memories, your desires, your emotions. One day you will die from it all when you die. All the loved ones, your family, friends, people you know, everything in this world you will leave. So part of meditation is investigating that, isn't it? Dying before you die. Learning to recognize everything is impermanent. And seeing where you carry around things in your mind is usually where you suffer, isn't it? We suffer because we love someone. We take ownership of them. My parent, my child, my partner, my friend. If you think about it, even having the concept of an enemy is a form of ownership, isn't it? My enemy. So every time you think of that person, you suffer because you formed an attachment to that concept. This person is an enemy, or group of people. And you just think about them, you get angry. You hear about them, you get angry. You see them, you get angry. They may, most of the time, not be doing anything to you at all, but just anything that reminds you of your enemy makes you angry. In the similar way, anyone you love or attach to puts you in a good mood, usually. So it's like when you're a teenager and you meet your friend and they're smiling, it's because they've met their girlfriend. Ajahn Chah used to say there's nothing for a young man that fills his mind with happiness like a young woman, or for a young woman to fill her mind with the thought of a young man. And it's on every level, isn't it? Sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, all of it fills your mind, so it makes you very happy, pleasurable. But it's a form of ownership, isn't it? That's what attachment is. You own that feeling of pleasure and the object that brings you the pleasure. Just as enmity and anguish also is a form of ownership. So when you come to recollect death, it helps to put these things into perspective. Simply as a mental exercise. You don't actually have to die yet. You're going to die anyway, so you don't have to hurry the process up. Just let it happen naturally, and hopefully you have a long life. But mentally, you can die anytime. You bring your mind to the breath, and it's like you're dying from whatever you were just attaching to. That thought, that image, that feeling, the emotion that was in your mind. If you establish mindfulness, that thing you were getting intoxicated by or lost in drops away. So if you follow the Buddha's instructions, you start contemplating impermanence, every breath in, every breath out, or even bringing up the recollection of death, every breath in, every breath out. And then things start to change. So in the way you look at the world, you look at yourself, look at your thoughts and your mental activities, and then look at other people in the material world. It changes a bit. Gives you a new perspective, a new way of looking at things. You might say, it's a more mature, more well-developed, more evolved way of looking at the world. Because you're now seeing through the lens of wisdom, from mindfulness wisdom, where you see, everything is impermanent. Ultimately, I must let go of everything. So sometimes you hear someone else has a brush with death, close encounter, or you yourself have some kind of near-death experience, or just meet with some crisis or some difficulty. It can, although it will be challenging and difficult, it can help wake you up a bit to what's important in life and help you to develop some of this new perspective. They always say if you are facing your death, you go to your meditation object, and this is the value of having practiced meditation through your life. If you practice mindfulness of breathing regularly, well, you've got something to turn to then. So you are facing a moment of uncertainty, you have a strange pain in your body, your heart skips a beat, or you have you're in a plane and there's turbulence, or you're in a car and there's some kind of danger, whatever. Go to the breath. It will help you to calm down in that moment. And that feeling of calm, steadiness that comes with being mindful of the breath, at the very least, that's a very peaceful thing to experience. Helps you to think more clearly, or maybe it prepares you to cope with whatever's happening. So the Buddha was encouraging us to develop mindfulness every day as a regular thing, as a regular practice. Bring up the mindfulness, partly to calm ourselves, relax, partly so we can see more deeply what's going on, understand things better. And it puts things in perspective. You realize the most important thing in life really is a peaceful mind. A mind that understands the way things are. Even more important than having a lot of money or wealth, a lot of friends, being successful. All these things we call worldly happiness, and sure, they have benefits, but very temporary benefits, very uncertain benefits. Whereas your own peaceful mind, that is something you can say you take with you at the end of your life, whatever happens next. And if you can't prove next life exists, there is such a thing as afterlife, at least you can die with dignity and peace if you're able to maintain mindfulness, because most people would probably agree, at the end of your life you would have some fear come up, confusion, worry, regrets. So if you've got a way to calm your mind and maintain composure, peace, well, that would be a very great thing. And this insight into impermanence that comes by, say, watching the breath go in, the breath go out, contemplating changing nature of things, contemplating death, is a very deep and profound insight, all through the history of Buddhism, from the Buddha through to the present day. People have been contemplating impermanence and had great insight into the way things are, seeing the way things are, letting go of greed, anger, delusion, these mental states we call defilement. More valuable, I would say, a peaceful mind and the insights that come from this kind of practice, more valuable than anything you can acquire in the world. And sometimes the Buddha would talk about it in that way, talk about the Sotapanna, the stream enterer, who's gained insight, seen the impermanent nature of their own body and mind. They're not fully enlightened, but they've got to step up in the path to Nibbana, to enlightenment. The Sotapanna, the insight they've had brings them so much happiness that the amount of suffering that left for them between becoming Sotapanna and then attaining Nibbana is very minor, very little. The Buddha got his finger and scraped the earth and said, the suffering of Sotapanna is like the dirt under my fingernails compared to all the dirt in the world. It's not that much, because they've had deep insight, and they're somebody who is focused on contemplating impermanence, recollecting death, like the Buddha. They see the value of that. They're actually happy doing that. It brings them joy, happiness to reflect on the impermanent nature of things. It's one way you can look at your practice, isn't it? If you're struggling to contemplate impermanence, you really don't want to accept it, that your life is impermanent, you get old, get sick and die, the things that you own are impermanent, your friends, your family are impermanent, you're struggling with that, you don't really want to listen to the Dhamma or reflect on it. It's probably a sign you're still quite a long way, your bharami is not that well developed, your spiritual qualities are not yet that well developed. But for someone who is further along the path, like a Sotapanna, stream enterer, they're happy to contemplate impermanence because they know it will free their mind from attachment. They can let go by seeing things as impermanent. They're actually more happy than, the Buddha said, more happy than a world-conquering emperor. I don't know if there aren't such things as world-conquering emperors anymore, but there's a lot of would-be world-conquering emperors, I think. All the people who want power in this world, they're kind of like would-be world-conquering emperors. But whatever they can achieve with power, money, politics, business, still can't match a Sotapanna who's had insight into the impermanent nature of body and mind. The Buddha said the Sotapanna has far more happiness, because their mind is peaceful. They've seen insight, they've had insight into the changing nature of conditions, and they let go. They've practiced dying before they die. They're still alive, but they don't have suffering, or not much suffering. Sotapanna still has a little bit of suffering, but not much. It's because they've let go. If you're aspiring to be a world-conquering emperor, a CEO, president, something, okay, well, maybe you can still do some good in the world and experience a lot of pleasure, but you'll still have a lot of suffering because you're not yet training your mind in vipassana or insight. So sometimes the Buddha would make these statements just to give people perspective, otherwise they get lost, don't they? They think, Buddhism is okay, meditation is okay, but I'd rather have a lot of money, a lot of power, or be famous. You ask school kids these days what they want to be, most people say, I want to be famous, I want to be well known, I want to be a YouTube influencer or something. That's what people aspire to, actually. You should be aspiring to be Sotapannas. Much less suffering, much happier. Anyway, each to their own. It depends on everyone's practice and where they're at, how well they're developed in their bharami. But for now, maybe I'll leave you with these few recollections or reflections, and after this, if there's any questions, happy to answer them for you.